Welcome to Rehash.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Rehash, a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and today we have two lovely guests, Frisson and Tommy, who work together at Content Guild, a DAO for creators that evolved out of the marketing arm of Tally, which is a DAO operations platform. In this episode, we'll be chatting with them about building a contributor network from scratch, marketing and media in Web3, and all things content and media Service DAO. I want to first of all say thank you to Frisson and Tommy for their patience, as this is the third time that we've tried recording this episode. We actually did record this at ETH Denver a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately we had some audio problems there, so we are re-recording, this time without our third nominee, Kyler, who was also nominated but unable to join. So before we get started, I just want to say that Frisson and Tommy and Kyler, who is not here today, were nominated by Caden and voted onto the podcast by Louis, Caden, and Frisson himself. Before we dive into our conversation, here's a quick word from the Web3 projects that helped make this season possible.
Social media wasn't designed for ads and algorithms. It was made for people. And at Lens Protocol, we're putting people back in control. We're not looking for users' data. We're here to build a community of collaborators, builders, artists, and dreamers ready to unlock a new world of social media. This isn't just an app. It's a flourishing ecosystem of platforms and experiences owned and operated by the developers and creators who are bringing it to life. In the Lensverse, you don't just own your content, you own everything. Your data, your connections, the value you bring to the table, it all stays in your possession, exactly where it should be. As a creator, the Lens ecosystem offers a new set of tools for connecting with your audience. Your data is truly portable and belongs to you. Post once and distribute everywhere in the Lensverse. You can even take your followers with you from app to app. As a developer, you can skip right past building the base layers and scaling your users by plugging your new app directly into Lens's existing infrastructure and community. So whether you create with a brush or a camera, sound waves or lines of code, it's time you got your due. Come create the future of social media with us on Lens Protocol. Lens is the last social media handle you'll ever need.
Have you seen how epic Ambire Wallet is?
How epic it is?
Yeah, cue the music. Ambire is a Web3 wallet that makes crypto self-custody easy and secure for everyone. Instead of relying on clunky seed phrases, you can create an account with the hardware wallet or username and password, secure it with two-factor authentication, and regain access with Ambire's cloud recovery. Need to pay out some contributors or execute a bunch of trades? No problem, Chief. Queue up as many transactions as you want, and when you're ready, execute the entire batch at the same time, paying gas only once. You can even prepay for gas with stablecoins or Ambire's native wallet token, which will get you some cash back. Without ever leaving the Ambire interface, you can manage assets from over a dozen chains, safely migrate them with Ambire's built-in bridge, and seamlessly interact with dApps like Uniswap, Aave, and Snapshot, all within the same transaction. Plus, Ambire is constantly growing their dApp catalog with trusted partners and collaborating with builders who want to establish the new standard for smart contract wallets. So, pretty epic, huh?
Yeah, I already know all that though. I've had an Ambire wallet for months.
And you didn't tell me?
You never asked. To get involved and truly own your assets, go to ambire.com. How was your day?
Bad.
What happened?
I bought some NFTs and then they just disappeared.
Sounds like your NFT creator should have used NFT.storage.
NFT. What?
NFT.storage. Come on, I'll show you. With NFT.storage, anyone can easily upload their NFT data to a decentralized and reliable storage network, completely for free.
Wow! How does it work?
Well, instead of relying on centralized and impermanent storage solutions, NFT.storage uploads your files to IPFS and Filecoin. These are powerful peer-to-peer networks that are made for the decentralized web. Thanks to IPFS's unique storage system, you can be confident that once your files are uploaded, they'll be accessible from anywhere in the world for as long as you'd like. They're already trusted by some of the biggest names in Web3, like OpenSea, Magic Eden, and Rarible. By adding files to these networks for free, NFT.storage is helping to turn proper NFT data management into a public good. This will ensure that NFTs will remain accessible and secure in the long run, so you won't get rugged again.
Gee, so I just upload my files and NFT.storage will take care of the rest?
Now you're getting it! Go to NFT.storage today to upload some NFT data of your own, for free. And be sure to follow NFT.storage on Twitter, at NFTDOTStorage.
Welcome to the podcast, guys. Thank you for being here once again. And hopefully third time's a charm and we'll make this one happen.
Excited to be here. Thank you, Frisson, for voting for us to come on this pod. I'm excited to be here once again for the third time.
I'm so proud of me for voting for myself.
As they say, if you can't love yourself, how can you expect others to love you, right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That's such a good justification.
It's a great way to start.
Thank you. Yeah. Also, we can record as many times as you want. You want to record a fourth time right after this? I'm ready. Let's go.
I love the enthusiasm. However, I have my fingers crossed that this will be the lucky charm and this will be it. But with that said, always happy to jam with you guys. And this is always a lot of fun. So to start us off, why don't you guys kind of just like define DAO as you see it? Because we're going to be talking about DAOs all episode. And so to sort of just set the stage and set the context, why don't you explain what you mean by DAO? I know some people out there are a little bit more technical in their understanding of DAOs, whereas other people see DAOs simply as a decentralized community. So we want to know where on the spectrum both of you fall with your understanding and definition of what a DAO is.
And the way I like to think of DAOs, and you kind of hinted at it, there's kind of a spectrum in the way people view it. And I think I'm kind of fluid in the way I view it. I think there are some characteristics that must be consistent across organizations to like necessitate calling it a DAO. But I like to view it and explain it to people as the way Frisson has quoted it to me. It's on his Twitter bio. I'm going to read it word for word. DAOs are how we do stuff together on the internet. And since I've heard that from him, that's kind of the way I've just viewed it and used it as a way to describe it to all my like normie friends or friends, parents who want to kind of understand what a DAO is, because DAO is that buzzword that we just assume people understand what we're talking about. So yeah, DAOs are how we do stuff together on the internet, how we organize on the internet, how we get shit done. So maybe that's hopefully a good intro for Frisson to kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start. I feel like the original acronym of DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, it gets a lot of hate. Maybe for a couple reasons. One is like the first DAO was very decentralized and autonomous and also very blew up. So people have a negative association with it. I think also there's like a lot of misunderstanding about like what decentralization and autonomy mean in the context of DAOs. But yeah, I'm actually a big fan of the acronym DAO. I think, organizations that are decentralized and autonomous are DAOs, and yeah, bring kind of something unique and new to the world of human coordination.
How do you define decentralized and autonomous in the context of what you would expect to see be part of a DAO or what you consider to be a DAO?
Yeah, for sure. I think they can be defined in a lot of ways, but ultimately for me, like there's multiple layers to it. For decentralization, I think it's really important that anyone can contribute. And I mean that in like a broad way, like not to say that anyone can just like randomly jump into your DAO from the public and not through any form of like contribution, just do something to your DAO. That's probably not a good model, but just like in theory, anyone could come in, understand what your DAO is doing, contribute something, and then ultimately be involved in, a decision-making process or drive the allocation of funds or make an improvement to the organization or the protocol. And they don't technically need permission from anyone to do that. That's kind of like where the autonomous side of it comes into. I think if there's like a specific group of people that are kind of bottleneck or a blocker to anything happening in the DAO where, is marketed as being open or feels open from the outside, but then when you sort of dig in and realize how the DAO actually works, there's really, a couple of people who actually like execute everything, and who all treasury decisions, all protocol upgrade decisions, all major organization decisions actually go through those couple of people, and they're sort of like permanently installed. There isn't sort of any sort of like election system in place. I would say that's not a DAO. Whereas if it's actually possible for like anything with sufficient community support to autonomously be executed, that would, I would say, be like more so in the DAO camp. So yeah, those are some thoughts I have on decentralization and autonomy in the context of DAOs.
You talk about, when you dig deeper into the DAO and you see there's a few people that all the decisions run through, right? Obviously, if they are installed and they cannot be removed and there's no other participants, that is not a DAO. What would you say if, say, there are, for instance, this is a problem I think we're running into with Content Guild, which we'll get into later if you don't know what Content Guild is. But, we have 12 voting members who have the ability to control the decisions in the DAO. But right now, only about 2 or 3 actually vote on proposals. So if you, like you said, you dig into that DAO, you go see the past 30 or so proposals are only voted on by, say, me, you, and Cool Horse Girl. Would you say that's not a DAO, or it's just a DAO that isn't functioning as it should be?
I think Content Guild is an aspiring DAO that has like some elements of DAO-ness to it. So we can think about it as a spectrum. At the start, it was literally just like me DMing people on Twitter and manually sending them payments from Tally's multisig to write articles. That's not a DAO. That's, the marketing department of Tally, right? Right. And then you could kind of imagine like starting there, and then all the way at the other end of that spectrum, you have like a fully operational service DAO where there's people, a more distributed kind of voting power over the treasury. There's a bunch of clients. There's a community-driven process for agreeing on new work. And the DAO is sort of like a self-sustaining organization. And Tally is just like a major contributor where we have some of the delegated voting power. We're one of the partners that funds the work. But if Tally were to just like go away, or just like decide to pursue a totally different marketing strategy, the DAO would be impacted, but would still be able to sort of move on and continue to be successful. I would say if you imagine that as like a continuum or a journey, we're like part of the way there. So, in terms of actually authorizing funds in the treasury, that is more decentralized now, where there are more people who have the ability to do that or block doing that. We have brought on a couple of like small examples of clients other than Tally that are funding work. We have some other people stepping up to lead the DAO, figure out operations besides Tally employees, but it's still early on in that process. So I would say we're an aspiring DAO with DAO elements, but not all the way there. That's just my opinion.
If I'm understanding you correctly, and also just for context, like the reason for this question isn't to like debate the semantics of what the definition of a DAO is. It's just to set the stage for what we are talking about when we keep saying DAO this, DAO that for the rest of this conversation. But it sounds to me like what you're saying, Frisson, is that you think a DAO is an organization that has those elements of decentralization and autonomy, but maybe not fully, not fully decentralized and autonomous, in the sense that you still have maybe some sort of hierarchy of leadership, but you have certain elements, like maybe the DAO together decides that certain decisions will be made in a decentralized manner, and that anybody can submit a proposal on X, Y, and Z topics. And if it passes, then it automatically gets executed. Is that an accurate understanding of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think there are really good reasons that just having it be a complete free-for-all inside of an organization is like not an effective way for humans to coordinate, like biological reasons, right? I think that, there's sort of naturally information asymmetry where there's like certain people who are really motivated to understand something really well. So in the case of Content Guild, right, it's a service DAO for creating content about DAOs. There's going to be people who, are really great writers, and people who want to be involved in scaling the operations of Content Guild, people who want to do BD and get involved in selling new work. And those are going to be the people who end up accruing a lot of social influence in the DAO. And they also should probably be the same people, or some of the people who end up having a lot of like technical power over the DAO, right? Who have the ability to propose new things, have the ability to veto things that get proposed that might not be a good idea. So I don't think picking 100 random or 1,000 random people off the street and being like, you guys get to decide what to do is really a recipe for, sustained success as an organization. So there's going to be naturally some concentration of both influence, like social influence, and like actual voting power, in the hands of people who have more of a vested interest in, and also like technical know-how and capability in the success of the project. I think the key for that to like still be decentralized, like on some sort of legitimate level, is that there's a good distribution of those folks. So it's not like 2 people, right? Maybe it's, depending on the project, more like a 10 or 100, maybe for like a really big organization. And also that the other stakeholders in the community have the ability to sort of like unelect or veto or vote out those, there's that authority is sort of like revocable in a permissionless way.
Yeah, I would agree with that pretty much to a T. So Content Guild, you guys have brought that up a few times now. I like to get into that and help our listeners understand better what Content Guild is. And I think there's a lot of learnings from Content Guild too that we can talk about on this episode. So why don't we start from the beginning? And why don't you start by telling us how Content Guild was born? How did that idea come about? What problems were you trying to solve, or what goals were you trying to achieve with that?
I'm just now realizing like Content Guild is a story. Content Guild is a story of Frisson and I, right? It's our friendship, our working relationship manifested into an actual DAO process, as we like to say.
It's really more of a bromance than anything.
There's a lot of parallels to real life in the creation of Content Guild.
I love that we're getting a new story third time around. See, I think what's happening each time is that we're getting bored of having the same conversation over and over again. So each time there's like more and more embellishments. So listeners, This is like the fully embellished version of Content Guild.
It's like the writing process, right? You have your draft, your second draft, and then you get the published version. So here we go. Content Guild, what are you gonna say? Say it, version.
Normally when you edit something, it reduces in scope, but we just added a bromance. So I don't know what's happening here, but I don't know if it's editing.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if that's the best analogy, because like in writing, the drafts are supposed to get better and better with each editing process. And I'm not sure that that's what's happening here.
Well played.
It is getting more entertaining every time around, I think.
It's getting more ridiculous.
More ridiculous and more entertaining.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Well, let me set the stage. Peak bull. Frisson joins Tally, and he realizes he needs help. He can't do it all by himself. And then one day, Tommy DMs him, and he's like, this is the guy I need. So I joined Tally. And then for about a couple months, all jokes aside, we kind of just like ideated on what Tally needs and like what is the best way to run a marketing department or operation for a crypto startup, a DAO tooling startup. It wasn't really my idea. I kind of came in, plugged and played, and kind of took it, or we teamed up to take to the next level. And you kind of mentioned it, like the way it was working was, I mean, first, the idea is we create a lot of content non-specific to Tally, but generally DAO specific in the space. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, like, someone reads or consumes our content, they don't necessarily know it's from Tally, so it doesn't feel very like extrative, but they're like, oh shit, like where is all this cool DAO content coming from? And it all, circles back to Tally. Start your DAO on Tally, run your DAO on Tally, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the concept of it. But the way it was working was Frisson he was building this network, but it was completely internal into himself. So he would just cold DM a bunch of writers and creators on Twitter. I don't even exactly know how he was doing it. He can follow up and if he wants to give details about how he was finding these people, but he had built this network, and we had started to build this network of content creators that were proving themselves by writing good content, and we were publishing it on Tally's blog. So a lot of these writers were up and coming who didn't have a big reach, but Tally had a big reach, or a relatively big reach related to them. We had a Substack, we had a newsletter that existed. Then we had our Tally blog, which was on Medium. And I think that was about it. And then when I jumped on, we started expanding. So our big new property was going to be DAO Talk, which is the podcast we have, which we do every week. And we bring on figures in the DAO space. Like Diana, you were on one of the early episodes of that. And then just having conversations. I think the big conversation we had that sparked the idea for Content Guild was with Aaron Soskin from Govern, which is the idea is a DAO for DAO content creators. So we started to think about okay, how do we do this? And the seed had kind of been planted in what Frisson had been doing, which was, we've seeded a community already, right? That's the hardest part, is finding members that just give a fuck, right? So we had this idea. It's I think we already have a good group of people, or a pool of people we can choose from, or we can find 5 to 10 people who are super motivated. So essentially we just created a DAO. So we worked for a DAO tooling company, but we didn't have much DAO building experience. So what we did was we're hey, we're going to take this entire network of content creators. We're going to keep Tally kind of at the center of it. Tally's going to fund it. That's how the DAO is going to start. And the idea was we don't really necessarily know what it's going to turn into, but we have this idea and we'll see if we can prove it. And if worse comes to worse, the DAO fails, we learn from it and we document the entire experience. So we made a whole content production out of it. So with Dennison, who's the co-founder of Tally, we just hopped on a Riverside call we're on now. And we're okay, we're going to launch this DAO. So we deployed a governor on OpenZeppelin's contract wizards. We launched a token contract, and we built the entire DAO from scratch. There's actually we have a hour-long tutorial. It took literally under an hour to go from zero to DAO, launched it on Tally, and then we just we collected addresses from every member who had ever either been on DAO Talk or who had contributed any writing or content to Tally. We airdropped them NFTs, and we're hey, we're starting this DAO. If you want to join, you can. If not, no worries. We token gated the Discord with Guild, and that was pretty much it. So now it's it's a DAO in process, right? It's not completely decentralized, but it has been functioning for about 6 or 7 months. So all these content contributors, instead of going to Frisson and asking for funding, the DAO itself approves funding for individual creators. So a creator comes in, we can talk about the vetting process after. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but they come in, they propose an idea for a piece of content. The DAO either approves or denies that content, and that's pretty much the entire process. And we can kind of get into the weeds or details if I missed anything, Frisson, but that's kind of where Content Guild is right now.
That's a great overview and excellent storytelling. Thank you, Tommy. I do have a few follow-up questions. I have a bunch of questions, actually, so I'm just going to start from the beginning. You said that basically the reason why Content Guild was created was because the age-old story of a company hires a head of marketing, and then the head of marketing ends up having to hire a whole team of people, right? This is kind of the joke if you're in marketing. And so Frisson's hired to be head of marketing, and he's okay, great, but now I'm going to also need a budget to hire writers and all these other kinds of people. So instead of doing that, Frisson, you had the idea of creating a service DAO. But I would say, and I think listeners can agree, that the sort of standard route when you're hired onto a company to lead the marketing team and realize you need more help is either A, to hire more people, or B, to hire an outside agency to take care of these needs that you have. So instead of going those traditional routes, you decided to spin up a service DAO. Help me understand the train of thought there, and what was it that led you to derail from those traditional paths and to try something totally new and experimental?
Yeah, we really like to create DAOs at Tally because, well, for a few reasons. We're all DAO people, so creating DAOs just comes naturally. But also, it's a really good way for us to learn about the product. And so part of it is I was looking for an excuse to create a DAO, I've been hired by Denison and Raf, the co-founders of Tally. And I was like, hey, look, I'm legit. I'm a DAO person. I can do it too. In the past, Tally has started Pride Punks DAO, which is an NFT DAO, and also Dope Wars, which is like a successful gaming ecosystem DAO. And so I wanted to play, right? So that was one part of it. I didn't want to just be the marketing executive that gets hired on and is like, well, I'm here to spend your money. I was like, no, I can also drive adoption of the product and use the product as well. So that was one part. And then also, I think like we want to be helpful to the DAO ecosystem, right? So the biggest existential risk facing every DAO tooling company is that DAOs don't make it. And so, we could be like, oh, we're just going to hire a bunch of people internally, or we could hire some agency that maybe has some experience in Web3 but isn't really directly involved in the ecosystem. Or we could try to solve this problem by actively investing in DAOs, right? Like this is still a meme, but it was a huge meme during the bull run is like all these DAO tooling companies are getting funded, but who's founding the DAOs? And we want to do that too, right? Tally. So we're not just like out there in our ivory tower at Tally being like, make the DAOs for our tooling, right? And then the last thing I would say is like, we were trying to find the best people to write about DAOs. And all those people are DAO contributors. Like, I'm sorry, no offense to like content agencies and stuff, but like just because you've written a few blog posts about like payroll software doesn't mean that you're going to actually be able to move the needle on what's next in DAOs. And so we wanted to find the very best people, and all those people are degenerate Web3 DAO contributors. And so we had to attract them with the DAO, right? Offer the opportunity for them to like become owners and help drive forward the initiative, which wouldn't have really been possible through a traditional agency model.
Speaking of agencies, what do you see as being the biggest differences between a Web 2 content agency versus a Web 3 content service DAO?
Maybe I'll start by saying I don't think they're that different. I think ultimately like they create content with teams of people in terms of the work product. But I think there are some subtle and very, very important differences in why people are there and how things work on the inside that point to some important differences between DAOs and companies broadly. The biggest one being that there's a much more direct path for someone to acquire ownership basically in the organization. So we have people who earned voting power in Content Guild through contribution that kind of already have somewhere between like 10 and 15% of all the voting power in Content Guild, which determines, what to do with the treasury. And that's really not something that you're going to see in the traditional agency world, right? It's much more of like a tops down approach. It's very hard and quite rare, I would say, for like new employees that come into an agency to actually get equity into the company. Whereas there's this sort of like much more direct path and intention with something like Content Guild.
I think that's the idea of the agency. And I think a lot of people like to think that's the way it works. Maybe not even a content agency, but just like, previously working in like Big Four consulting, that's the idea of like the partnership, right? You come in early, you work your way to the top. The people at the top would say, "Oh yeah, if you work harder, you'll get the equity, you'll get what you put in." But that's not true from experience. Maybe there are agencies out there that actually do that, and good on them. But on the whole, the story is like you get this young talent into the agency, into the organization, and they're not getting what they put in. They are kind of like the slave labor of the entire organization that actually makes it run, but it's not equitable. I think, those problems, those obviously can still exist in DAOs, but I think it creates a much more level playing field and completely eliminates the barriers to entry and makes it a lot easier to not only like stop those extractive power structures from existing, but also gives people the right to exit those power structures if they're forming and kind of fork it into a new organization. Whereas I think in traditional agencies, it's much harder to do that. That's kind of where I think about it all. Like we had that conversation on the previous episode, and I've thought about it a lot, not knowing we were going to re-record, but just like, what is the difference? Why would I tell one of my friends who I think would be, a wonderful contributor to a DAO to leave their traditional agency. Right now, I don't know if I could convince them to do it just because of like the stability of it all. And like people like Chiron, who are just like serial contributors who are literally making a life out of this work, exists, and we're proving it's possible. We need more of those people to like actually show like, hey, this is how we bridge you from here to here. This is why it's better. Because I think we see it and we have this deep-seated belief in the system, but until we have like tangible, outcomes to show, like Frisson said, like I think they're similar. I think they have the ability to be much more different than they currently are. It's just going to take time.
Yeah, I think overall it's kind of like the contributors in a Web3 content service DAO have a lot more upside than they do at a Web2 content agency, right? Where some content agencies will take up to 90% of what the client is paying them. And so, like you said, Tommy, the people doing all of the work are making 10% of the proceeds of the revenue, which is, I think everybody can agree is very backwards. And so with service DAOs, the contributors actually reap the rewards of their labor and have more upside, not just in the form of payment, but also in the form of ownership by governance, by helping decide where the DAO, like where a content guild in your case is headed, maybe which other people you guys allow into the DAO, which speaking of that, actually, another follow-up question I had for you, Frisson, is how did you go about initially building that network of contributors that you now have, especially keeping in mind that the tricky thing about content is that you're not only looking for contributors who can come in and vote yes or no on a proposal, which, most people can read a proposal and decide for themselves yes or no, but you're actually looking for people who can create good content, which regardless if we're talking about written form or audio or video, good content is really hard to make. And it's very subjective as well. So how did you go about finding people who not only were Web3 native, these Web3 degenerates, as you called them, but also people who knew how to communicate in the most effective way these varying concepts in Web3?
Well, I think I was really looking for content that I learned from. As someone who worked at a DAO tooling company and was trying to come up to speed on the space, I was basically just using the heuristic of like, did this article that I'm reading right here enhance my knowledge of the DAO ecosystem, help me understand something I could try to be more successful going forward and like generally push the ecosystem forward. So I went looking for like literally every piece of written content I could find on the internet about DAOs and then just DM'd the people who wrote it. if I liked it, it was pretty simple.
Nice. And then how do you guys go about vetting for quality of content? So like say Frisson, you find an article that really helped you and you DM the writer and the writer's like, hell yeah, let's do it. Like, let me write some stuff for Content Guild. And then they write something and it's trash, and you're like, we can't publish this under Tally's name. What's the process you guys have in place for sort of like determining whether a piece of content is good or bad or good enough to publish?
Well, I think, now the dynamic has changed a little bit where when we were starting Content Guild or just when Tally was originally looking for writers, I was having to go out and try to, go outbound and find people to write. Now Content Guild and Tally have enough traction that we get people coming to us. And we have like a social process internally at Content Guild where we approve someone to become a contributor or not. There's like a form that they fill out, including links to previous writing and what they want to write about. And then all the editors, who are all the people that have voting power in Content Guild, just like align socially on whether they think that person should become a contributor or not. There haven't been a lot of instances where someone that we have evaluated and, vetted has actually written something and it hasn't turned out to be up to standards. But ultimately, like, the publisher that's funding the work does have, veto power. They certainly don't have to publish something. And then like, we don't actually release the funds from the treasury, there's an on-chain vote for whether or not to actually like pay a contributor for the work that they did. And so, if it was the case where there was a piece that just like didn't, a writer who didn't end up delivering and they wanted to create a proposal to get paid, hopefully our editors would not actually like authorize that payment because they didn't, deliver the work that was promised.
Gotcha. When you mention editors, these are the people with governance power. Can you break down how governance works in Content Guild? What is the role of these editors? How did they get selected, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier we launched 2 contracts when we started Content Guild. One has a governor attached to it, which if people are unfamiliar with governor, it is the contract that OpenZeppelin standardized that basically runs every big DAO that barring like a couple like Maker, which is a different story. But we have 2 contracts. One is just an NFT that has no governance rights. That's just to token gate the Discord that gets people membership into the actual DAO. And then you have a governance NFT, which we call the editor's pass. So we call it editor just because for all intents and purposes, you are an editor, right? You're editing content, and you're allowing content to be produced. But originally, we launched it with just 4 members of Tally. And then progressively, as we've started to operate the DAO and decentralize, we've started to bring in new members. And the way it originally worked was we just kind of had a social consensus, like, hey, this person's been contributing to the DAO. They've proven that they care and we trust them. Should we bring them on? We vote yes. And we've just, as we've added more members, we've just progressively had to have more people vote yes. But there's been no one that said no that we've elevated. So I think we started with 4 and now we are at 11 total. So Tally employees are outnumbered currently. And what these editors passes actually have rights to is moving money from the treasury to content creators. So the way it works is you go on Tally and a member submits a proposal to get funded. Before they even submit that proposal, there is like a soft social consensus process in the Discord. So a non-voting member or voting member can submit an idea for a piece of content. Everyone in the Discord is like, yay or nay, or maybe shift this, shift that. And then there's a template we use to submit a proposal on Tally. So they go ahead, submit the proposal on Tally. It has their like a blurb about what the article is, their wallet address on Polygon, how much they're getting paid for that article. And then once it's submitted on Tally, all of the members who have voting rights, who have that editor's NFT, go on Tally and vote yes or no to submit that proposal on chain. If it passes, it's executed on chain. The money moves from the treasury to the attached wallet address. That's pretty much it. And then you also have, on top of that, you can like make changes to the contract itself or to the DAO itself. Like if you wanted to update the time lock period on voting, update the governor, etc., the editors have that right as well. But again, that goes down to a vote. Not one editor can make one sweeping change.
Yeah, very different from a traditional content agency where one person makes all the changes. I'm curious, to sort of wrap up this conversation about Content Guild, what are your plans for the future of Content Guild? Like, I know right now it sounds like Content Guild is still in the early days. You're experimenting with a lot of new things, kind of seeing how things work. If all goes well, however you want to define that, where does Content Guild stand in, let's say, 1 year from now?
We're going to take all the treasury that we have left and 100 exit on Dogecoin, and then we're just gonna hope that it works out. No,
don't leak the real alpha, Frisson. Tell people what they want to hear.
So as I mentioned, we're kind of on that like path to decentralization, and I'm hoping that like Content Guild continues on that path. And so I think the biggest unlock would be, to increase the overall publisher base or like sources of funding for Content Guild. Right now, Tally is paying Content Guild contributors to create content about DAOs. We have a couple of other organizations that are working with us to fund content. I think if we can expand that and find more organizations that want to partner with our crew of amazing, dozen or so DAO writers and content creators to create content, that will go a long way towards having like more stakeholders within Content Guild and also giving it like staying power going forward. So I think, in general, finding more partners to fund work, and also internally at Content Guild, kind of looking for some folks like who want to step up and lead Content Guild through that transition, especially folks that like aren't Tommy or I, right? Like I think we'll always be strong contributors to Content Guild, and hopefully Tally will always be like a publisher and a funder of content. But would love to see some additional like leadership step up within Content Guild, right? Like one thing I talk about is like, even though DAOs usually don't have like a named leaders, right? Like you're the CEO of the DAO, because there's supposed to be the ability for anyone to step up into that role. That doesn't mean there aren't leaders in the DAO. In fact, I would say like DAOs or decentralization requires even more leadership, because inside of a traditional organization, you can just have like fall back on, well, that person makes the decision, right? Because that's their title. And so really excited for some members of Content Guild to like step up into leadership roles and help lead the organization into like a more decentralized and sustainable future.
Yeah, I want it like big vision. I want us to be the example and prove what's possible with service DAOs, with content DAOs, so that we can start to unlock, like I said, we need more examples of like, why should you come over? And I want to prove like, hey, like without a shadow of a doubt, like there shouldn't be like any convincing. It should be like, oh my God, that's fucking awesome. How do I join? So that's my vision. Frisson was good with like the details.
I love that. Quick follow-up to that. What is your long-term vision for, I guess like the Web 2 corporate speak would be employee retention, but for contributor retention, is that something that you're concerned about? Is that something that, you're kind of like, hey, if these people, start doing work, if we start having these other partners that fund Content Guild and we're creating content for them and they're essentially clients of ours, and our contributors move over and work for them full time or move on and do their own thing and freelance on their own, like we're happy whatever happens? Or how do you guys think about this aspect of building the Service DAO?
I think that DAOs need to be competitive in the marketplace for labor. So I think it would be very like non-DAO-ish for a DAO to try to like retain contributors by being like, sign this contract that you'll only work for us, right? Like you sort of like, once you've gone down that road, you should probably like chill with calling yourself like a DAO or trying to participate in the ecosystem in that way. That's just my opinion. I think if we have contributors that are like, just completely stop contributing to Content Guild because it's more fulfilling and profitable for them to do their own freelance work or to join a company, first of all, we'll celebrate them, be like, congrats on finding some more freelance work or finding a full-time job if that's what you want to do. But second of all, we probably need to raise our prices, and be competitive. I don't think, what we've seen so far, like, I don't think for a Content Guild to have contributors, it needs to be like the single most lucrative source of like funding for professional writers of all time. I just think it needs to be worth doing, right? And then people also like to be in Content Guild because of kind of that opportunity for leadership and also a community, right? Like we're friends and like we help each other and hang out and write each other's content and help people build their personal brand to like have opportunities to write with Content Guild or with our partners. So yeah, that's my like long-winded answer on contribution.
I would agree with that. TLDR, competition is good because we want to make sure people are competitively paid. But at the same time, this isn't like the corporate world where we're going to enslave people to working for one company for the rest of their lives. Great. Any final thoughts on Content Guild or Service DAOs or any of that before we wrap up here and move on to our very fun game that I know Tommy has been looking forward to all day?
I just can't wait for this game to start.
All right, let's start the game. Okay, so you guys have played the game before. You know how it works. We're going to do it a little differently this time. The last time we had two people on the podcast, it was LDF and Reka, and I would just say a word, and both of them would kind of shout out like whatever came to mind for them first. I know when we did it live, we did it, like one word per person. So I'm going to say a word. You guys just go ahead and shout out the first word that comes to mind. you know the rules. Don't take too long to think. And now that there's competition between the two of you, if one of you shouts out one word first, the other one isn't allowed to say that word. So you want to really shout out the first word that comes to mind immediately. Okay, so
this is harder. This is worse. There's more pressure now. It's fine. Let's do it.
I'm gonna like pick a word before the question and just say it no matter what it is. So for this first one, it's just gonna be like dolphin. No matter what you say, I'm just gonna be like dolphin.
Okay, well, you're only allowed to say each word once, so you can't just say dolphin for every single word. So you can use that for your first one. You can use that for your first one.
This is a decentralized podcast. I can say dolphin however many times I want.
There are minimal levels of censorship, just being that you can't repeat the word I said and you can't say the same word every time. And I've got 10 words here, so let's get started. First one, social capital.
Content.
Wait. How do we know who goes in what order?
No, we go at the same time.
Yeah.
Bro. You have no excuse this time.
Just say dolphin.
There's no conference.
Just say dolphin. You already thought of your first word.
Friends.
Okay. Creator.
Writing.
Pablo.
Interoperable.
Governor.
Blockchains.
Privacy.
Lie.
Important.
Moat.
Castle.
Community.
Modular.
Legos.
Governor.
Scalable.
DAOs.
Layer 2s.
Permissionless.
Ethereum.
You know,
that was the first word that came to mind.
I said that in the beginning.
Pick
Did
a
I not
new
say
word.
that, Tommy? Thank you.
You said it. Yeah, you said that. Pick a new word. Bitcoin.
Nature.
Okay. Concentric circles.
What? First of all, that's 2 words. Second
You
of
can
all,
pick 2 words. You can pick a word or a phrase.
That's
What'd you
way
say?
too hard.
Acid?
Why is that funny?
He's just stalling.
The spiral jetty. Do you guys know what the spiral jetty is?
What is it?
It's like weird, naturally forming, like land. Like it's just like something that formed in nature in the Great Salt Lake that is like a giant
Oh,
spiral.
you're from Salt Lake, dude? I didn't know. You're from Salt Lake? Continue, please.
Okay, last one.
A lot of people go there to
sorry,
observe.
you weren't done yet. My bad.
A lot of people go there to observe the concentric circles and do the thing that Tommy said.
Oh.
I was talking about acid for construction purposes. I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh,
either,
yeah.
So I guess we better move on.
Better move on. Last word, layer 1.
Old news.
Nation
What?
state. That's one word. There's a hyphen in there. Nation. I stopped myself from saying it, but then nation state.
Good job, guys. Tommy, you did exponentially better this time around.
I actually did better than Frisson. Because
did.
Frisson at one point answered with 47 words instead of 1. So
Yeah, and then at one point he answered with a word that required a whole explanation for people to understand what it was. But now we all know what spiral jetties are. So
Kind
great
of.
for us.
Are we just gonna? Can we just like cut that game? Can we
absolutely
cut that
not.
from the-
No, that's actually a really integral part of the podcast. Sorry.
All right, I'll just skip that part when I'm listening to the episode.
You can
just
do that,
pretend
yeah.
it didn't happen.
Okay.
I'll
that's
press
fine.
the forward
I'll
15
be-
seconds button.
So
like
I'll be
25
clipping
times.
that and sharing it everywhere. So
Yeah,
you'll
same.
see it eventually.
Same. We'll publish the original too. Don't worry, Tommy. We're coming for you too.
That's fine. I don't care. I have nothing to hide.
Okay, last thing, guys, before you go, tell people where they can find you if they want to follow you personally, and also where people can go to learn more about Content Guild and start a DAO on Tally.
Yeah, I'll start with the Content Guild and Tally. You can find Tally primarily on Twitter at TallyXYZ. Everything's pretty much TallyXYZ. So Instagram, TallyXYZ, Twitter, TallyXYZ, Tally.xyz for the website. Content Guild, we have a Twitter account that's run by one of our members. It's Content Guild XYZ. That is where you'll find all your information if you want to join or just get involved with the DAO or just learn about it. Go there. You can find me personally on Twitter. That's where I spend most of my time at Tommy Lauer or Lower, depending on how you pronounce it. I don't care. And then I doxed my Instagram last time. But yeah, I try to cross pollinate on Instagram with some like real life content and then bring the normies the crypto way. Diana follows me. You see, I post some like tweet screenshots on my Instagram story. So if you are trying to like, you know, I haven't found many people that live both lives, the Instagram and the Twitter life. Usually it's one or the other. Go follow me. My username is my name without the vowel. So it is Tommy Lauer, TMMYLWR. But yeah, that's me.
I don't know if you guys knew this, but Tommy lifts.
Frisson lives in Salt Lake and Tommy lifts.
I
The
lift
end.
weight, yeah. At the end. Goodbye.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at 0xfrisson. You know, if you want to see some unhinged takes, this podcast was just a taste of how unhinged it can get. And then if we're friends, I can give you my alt and you can go one click deeper into the level of unhingedness to the bottom of the Earth's core where it's just 100% unhinged at all times.
What's your alt?
Dude, Frisson's alt is unbelievable.
DM it to me right now. Also, Frisson is spelled Frisson for those who aren't familiar with the word Frisson, including myself before I met you. Cool. Thanks, guys, so much for recording this episode for the third time with me. I can't say I've ever recorded an episode this many times before, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's really gotten better every single time, more and more entertaining. Hopefully our listeners agree with that. We'll try to schedule a live stream for next week after this episode drops with you guys so people can get even more of Frisson and Tommy, the dynamic duo. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Rehash. If you enjoyed this episode, please do go on Apple Podcasts and rate, review, and subscribe. I know that's something that a lot of people forget to do or think doesn't matter. It actually helps us out a lot if you can go do that. So 5-star review and leave a quick comment. Tell us what you liked about it. And we will be back again next week with another episode of Rehash. See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Rehash. Rehash is hosted by Diana Chen, produced and edited by Ellie Dots and Tyler Internet, and sponsored by Lens, Empire Wallet, and NFT.storage. Rehash is also supported by Rehash DAO, a community of NFT holders who curate our guest lineup each season. To get involved, head over to our website at rehashweb3.xyz and collect this episode as an NFT. Anyone who collects an episode becomes a part of Rehash DAO and will be able to nominate guests for future seasons. Voting rights are reserved for our guests, sponsors, and OG crowdfund supporters. And to learn more about how to become a guest or sponsor, go to rehashweb3.xyz/podcast. Finally, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at rehashweb3 or on Lens at rehash.lens.